Good afternoon. How are you? Well, it's a little chilly. If it was 10 degrees cooler, we'd start approaching skiing weather. Thomas Jefferson says it's 42 degrees. The humidity is 84, and you can feel the moisture. You can feel it in the air. The wind's only 3.2 miles an hour. So we're heading toward winter, I guess. Let's go over a couple of things going on that I think suggest a vector. Vector in physics is a direction and a force. And it feels like there is a growing force toward civilization again. And we have to keep watching it. We have to be active to help it as best we can. So let me give you a couple of examples that I think are encouraging. When it comes to an emergency, we think of FEMA. And we think of how it helps, is crucial, saves lives, makes a difference for the better in the case of a crisis. And Trump put in charge of this the dog-killing fashion plate who wants to disassemble FEMA. But here's the kicker. There's a commission she's on. She's the co-chair of it. And it was charged with making a recommendation as to what to do with FEMA. And it said and decided that they needed more, not less, of what FEMA does. And Noam's going to have to report to the president what the findings were of the commission. What do you think he's going to do with that? And so it shows courage isn't a fair word to describe what people are doing that's right when a good person of character does what's right, period. They don't think of it as courage. That's what they do. That's their duty. That was their oath. How different that kind of performance is from what Trump expects. Does whatever he wants, ignores the law, ignores the Constitution. Now, here's another one. Social Security had proposed age limits on disabilities. We're all terrific until 40, and then it's a rearguard action. You might not become disabled your entire life, but if you do, it's as you get older. So, is this this is a policy that under Social Security we're going to give less protection to people as they get older if they have disabilities? In fact, we're going to ignore it. There's also a study that's been going on forcing those older to work based on studies that show people could work some. Now, I don't suppose this group of hee-haws knows what was posted on the concentration camps across Germany. But one of them was Arbeit macht frei. Work makes you free. Yeah, free of worldly concerns. Free of health. Free without liberty. That's what it means. So, Trump, if there's a pattern he has, even just among these couple of items, it's to punch holes in the safety net so more people fall through. More people can be devastated. And we can decide to do that when we've seen the beneficent approach help so many. Okay, let's go on to look at the Department of Injustice. Now, the Comey indictment I don't say this to the exclusion of there being faults in the other recent indictments done at the behest of, insistence of, direction of felon Trump, ironic. And in the Comey case, it appears they went before the grand jury with 3 charges. The grand jury wouldn't buy one of them, so there was 2 that the prosecution, inexperienced and politically directed, dealt with by bringing 2 to the grand jury. But they didn't bring it to the grand jury. They only brought it to the foreman of the grand jury, and the foreman approved the 2 counts, and no other member of the grand jury voted. The court has pointed out a case in 1969 that described the requirements of an indictment, and among them is that the grand jury actually considers the charge, the indictment. Now, the Court of Appeals just gave a green light to, well, let me finish this up first. They just gave a green light to another case. But in this case at hand, you have a judge who's now considering whether or not to dismiss the indictment for its failure. Now, that would be the end of Comey's indictment if I have my facts straight, because the statute of limitations was looming when they rushed to do this, and they have a U.S. attorney who may be illegal herself. And we still have the questions of vindictive and selective prosecution. We don't even get to the facts of the case and whether or not the charges involving his testimony in Congress is a frivolous charge or not. Now, there's another case going on, and forgive me because I was for a moment melding them together. And it's, if you remember, toward the outset, a judge was having trouble getting the government, the Department of Indifference, to tell him where these people who were seized, where they were. Were they in the United States? Were they in a plane going to El Salvador? Was it appropriate for these Venezuelans to do that? Because that's how they were identified. And it appeared that there were several instances of misconduct that affected this entire scenario. And Judge Boschberg, he was considering contempt, holding the government in contempt. Now, as a result of getting a green light from the Court of Appeals to continue with his inquiry, he has a 2-part inquiry. And the second part may not be invoked, depending on the first. And the first is, are there facts here justifying a contempt? And if so, then we move on to contempt proceedings. So, did Drew Ensign mislead the court when he was telling the court not to worry, everything's okay? As bad or worse is the fact that Emile Beauvais, if that's how he says his name, former personal lawyer to Trump and a judge who was rewarded with a seat on the Third Circuit as a judge, allegedly told subordinates to disregard the court's order. Does that sound like a resume for somebody who should be put on the court himself? Nah. So, the Senate is not happy with this, but more importantly, the court that's considering it is not happy with this. And happy isn't really the right word. The right word is the court is offended at the contemptuous conduct to ignore its orders and to give false information. And that this has 2 outcomes. One is that you were misleading us about how to handle people, that you were sneaking out of the country to El Salvador. The other is you're telling lawyers who've taken an oath to ignore the law, to ignore an order of the court. So I don't think it's too much guesswork to think the court, with this history of public admissions and a whistleblower, is going to be able to kick this to the side. So we'll have to watch that space. Now, the Senate has told our goose-stepping AG, who defers to the slightest illegal, corrupt wish of our president, not to be so slow with handing over the Epstein materials. We know what they'll try to do. Let's see if they do it. There are other avenues to, quote, keep them honest, in the sense of reliable sources that will contradict the failure to produce material. Go offshore for a few minutes. The Israelis have killed 25 persons in Gaza. It's a great ceasefire that Trump's worked out over there. Really good, huh? And last but not least, and maybe foremost, is a scenario that anticipates and concerns itself with Dr. Strangelove. In 1964, I think I have my date right, Dr. Strangelove was a movie. And it was about a general that found a way to take into his own hands a hydrogen bomb to drop it. And while it's a dark comedy, it's interesting to watch because it's a story of what could happen. So, what could happen here? What if Trump gave an illegal order? Now, we can think of subtle ones, we can think of really large ones. What if he says, open up on a crowd, even if they're just demonstrating in LA? What if he says, wherever you see a Hispanic person, scoop them up, put them in your wagon, and take them away? And you can think of more. So, Trump has said that those Democrats who are suggesting the military should refuse illegal orders, they deserve death. That's our Trump. He calls it seditious behavior from traitors, and we should lock them up. One of those persons is Mark Kelly, former astronaut and U.S. Senator. I'm sure there are others. So what do we see? We see Trump becoming more desperate. There are more signs of his ill health. His grandiose images of destruction and power are very serious affronts to our entire former system of constitution and laws. And I'm saying this to you a day after they were making kissy face like two despots who are comfortable with murder and killing and unconstitutional actions, unrestrained by law or reason. We're talking about Saudi Arabia at the White House. They get an audience and we give the back of the hand to Zelensky. Our order of priorities is upside down. But like I said at the beginning, there are vectors of force pushing toward a constitutional government and a democracy, and thus a resistance to the wannabe monarch, Trump, going forward with his crazy plans. But we have to oppose him at every turn of insanity that he proposes, other than those just to distract us, because he follows through on some of these terrible things, and we have to cut that out. It's helpful that there's a split in MAGA. So if they're 40%, how's that split work? Is it 10 and 30? Is it 20-20? What is it? And it must make a difference that not only are the MAGA members, if I can call them that, not only are they upset about Epstein, they have other things, and they number among them what has been the past leadership. Of course, we're talking about Representative Green, who's been very close, and at almost every rally, I think, involving the Epstein thing. But we have others in his fold that are not supportive. The extent of it, the effectiveness of it is uncertain. But others have been encouraged to be active, Democrats including those on the Hill. And this is the promise that we have, that our hope is not empty when there are people actually working to restore our government to the people. So that's what I got on this Cathedral of Trees. Look forward to talking to you tomorrow. Bye-bye.